When my own son looked me in the eye and said I was nothing but a burden living off his success, I knew something inside me had to die, or maybe something had to be reborn. The words came out of his mouth like venom, sharp and deliberate, designed to cut deep. And they did. They sliced through every sacrifice I'd made, every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about his future, every dream I'd deferred so he could chase his own. In that moment, standing in the kitchen of the house I'd raised him in, I realized I had become invisible, not just to him but to myself. My name is Lorraine, and this is the story of how I went from being dismissed as a has-been housewife to becoming the most valuable person in my son's professional world, without him ever knowing it was me. I'm 52 years old, though some days I feel ancient and others I feel like I'm just beginning. For the past 28 years, I dedicated my life to being a mother and a wife. I gave up my career in graphic design when I got pregnant with my son Derek. Back then my husband Tom and I agreed it made sense. He was climbing the corporate ladder, and we wanted our child to have a parent at home. It seemed like the right choice, the responsible choice, the loving choice. I remember the day I turned in my resignation at the design firm where I'd been working. I was 24, pregnant, excited about motherhood, but also terrified about giving up the career I just started building. My boss, a woman named Patricia who was in her 50s at the time, pulled me aside before I left. "Lorraine," she'd said, her hand on my shoulder, "I understand your choice and I respect it. But promise me something. Don't let yourself disappear completely. Keep your skills sharp. Keep learning. Because the world will try to make you forget that you're more than just a mother." I'd smiled and nodded, thinking she was being overdramatic. How could I forget who I was? But Patricia had been right. Slowly, year by year, I'd let pieces of myself slip away until all that remained was my role as Derek's mother and Tom's wife. Tom passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack. One moment he was trimming the hedges in our backyard, the next he was gone. Just like that. The grief was overwhelming, a physical weight that pressed down on my chest every morning when I woke up and reached for him, only to find empty sheets. But I had Derek. Or at least I thought I did. He'd moved back home temporarily after his father died, said he wanted to make sure I was okay. For a few months we were close again like when he was younger. We'd have dinner together, watch old movies, talk about Tom and laugh through our tears. I remember thinking that maybe this tragedy had given me my son back, had reminded him that family mattered. How naive I was. But then Derek met Vanessa. Vanessa was everything I wasn't, at least in Derek's eyes. She was 26, ambitious, polished, and worked in finance. She wore designer clothes and spoke in that confident, clipped manner that made everything sound like a business transaction. Her hair was always perfect, her makeup always flawless, her nails always manicured. She carried herself like someone who'd never doubted her worth, never questioned her right to take up space in any room. The first time Derek brought her home for dinner, I'd spent all day cooking his favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables and homemade rolls. I'd set the table with our good china, the set Tom and I had received as a wedding gift. I'd wanted to make a good impression, to show her that Derek came from a loving home. Vanessa had picked at her food, pushing the vegetables around her plate with a look of polite disgust. "I'm sorry, Lorraine," she'd said with a tight smile. "I'm mostly plant-based. Red meat doesn't really align with my wellness philosophy." Derek had jumped in quickly. "Mom, Vanessa's really into health and fitness. She's training for a marathon." "Oh, how wonderful," I'd said, trying to hide my disappointment. "I wish you'd told me. I could have prepared something different." "It's fine," Vanessa had waved dismissively. "I'll just eat the vegetables. Though I have to say, the amount of butter you use is probably not great for Derek's cholesterol." I'd felt my smile freeze on my face. Tom had died of a heart attack, and here was this woman, who barely knew us, criticizing how I fed my son in the house where I'd fed him for 28 years. But Derek had just laughed. "Vanessa's right, Mom. I've been trying to eat healthier. You should really try it too. It might help with." He gestured vaguely at my body, and the implication hung in the air like smoke. That dinner had set the tone for everything that followed. Within 6 months they were engaged. Derek proposed at some expensive restaurant downtown, the kind with a Michelin star and portions the size of a quarter. He didn't tell me about the engagement until 3 days after it happened, and only because I'd asked about his weekend. "Oh yeah, I proposed to Vanessa on Saturday," he'd said casually, as if he was telling me about the weather. Within 8 months they were married. The wedding was small, intimate, they'd said. Only close friends and immediate family. I'd helped pay for it, dipping into the life insurance money from Tom. I'd spent weeks looking for the perfect mother of the groom dress, had gotten my hair and makeup professionally done, had practiced my speech for the reception. At the wedding, Vanessa's mother had given a long, emotional toast about her daughter's accomplishments, her strength, her bright future. When it was my turn, Derek had stepped up to the microphone first. "I just want to quickly thank everyone for coming," he'd said, his arm around Vanessa. "Special thanks to Vanessa's parents for their incredible generosity, and to my mom for, being here. For being here. 28 years of raising him, and I'd been reduced to being here." Within 9 months of the wedding, Derek sat me down and delivered the news that changed everything. "Mom, Vanessa and I have been talking," he began, his voice carrying that patronizing tone people use when they're about to say something they know will hurt you. We were sitting at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework, where we'd carved pumpkins, where we'd eaten countless meals as a family. "We think it's time you became more independent." I remember stirring my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl into the dark liquid, creating patterns that disappeared as quickly as they formed. "Independent? Derek, I am independent. I've been managing just fine since your father passed." "That's not what I mean." He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Vanessa sat beside him, her face a mask of practiced sympathy, the kind you see on TV doctors delivering bad news. "You don't work, Mom. You don't have your own income. You're living off Dad's life insurance and the savings. That's not sustainable. Your father and I saved that money together," I said quietly, feeling something hard forming in my chest, like a stone growing in my heart. "We planned for our retirement. This was always the plan." "But you're not retired," Vanessa interjected, her voice sweet as poison, dripping with false concern. "You're only 52. People your age are at the peak of their careers. Don't you want purpose? Don't you want to contribute something meaningful to society?" The way she said "people your age" made me feel like I was ancient, obsolete, ready to be put out to pasture. The way she said "contribute something meaningful" implied that everything I'd done for the past 28 years had been worthless. I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to remind his wife that I'd contributed plenty by raising him, by supporting his father, by building the home that had given him the foundation to become the successful marketing executive he was now. I waited for him to tell her that caring for a family was meaningful work, that not everything valuable comes with a paycheck. But Derek just nodded along like a puppet on strings. "Vanessa's right, Mom. You need to get a job, start building something for yourself. It's not healthy to just sit around the house all day. You're wasting your potential." "I don't sit around," I protested, but even as I said it I could hear how weak it sounded. What did I do all day? I gardened, tending to the roses Tom and I had planted together. I volunteered at the library, reading to children twice a week. I took care of the house, cooking meals that no one came to eat anymore, cleaning rooms that no one visited. I read. I existed. But in their eyes, none of that counted as real contribution. In their eyes, I was just taking up space, consuming resources, serving no purpose. "We've actually been thinking," Derek continued, and I noticed he couldn't quite meet my eyes, focusing instead on a spot just above my shoulder, "that maybe you should consider downsizing. This house is too big for one person. You could sell it, get a small apartment, invest the rest. It would give you financial security for the future." And there it was, the real agenda. They wanted my house. The house Tom and I had bought 30 years ago, when it was just a small ranch that needed work. The house we'd renovated together, painting walls while I was pregnant, installing new floors while Derek took his first steps on them. The house we'd expanded when Derek was 10, adding the sunroom where Tom and I would sit in the evenings watching the sunset. The house where we'd celebrated every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. The house where Tom had died in the backyard he'd been so proud of, his garden shears still in his hand. "This is my home," I whispered, and I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "It's just a house, Mom," Derek said, and those 4 words broke something in me that I didn't know could break. "You're being emotional and impractical." Vanessa and I are trying to help you see reason. We're thinking about your future. I looked at this stranger wearing my son's face, and I realized he'd been replaced. Or maybe he'd always been like this, and I'd been too busy loving him to notice. Maybe I'd raised him to be exactly this selfish, this entitled, this cold. Maybe by always putting him first, by always making sure he got everything he wanted, I'd created a monster who believed the world owed him everything and gave him the right to take whatever he pleased, even from his own mother. We're also thinking about starting a family soon, Vanessa added, examining her perfect nails as if this conversation bored her. This house would be perfect for children. Much better than that cramped condo we're in now. And really, what do you need all this space for? You're just one person rattling around in here, wasting it. The implication was clear. I was wasting the house by living in it alone. My presence here was wasteful, unnecessary, an inefficient use of resources. I should pack up my memories, abandon my home, and make room for their new family. That night, I lay in the bed I'd shared with Tom for 30 years, in the room where we'd laughed and fought and loved and planned our future. I cried until I had no tears left, until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. I cried for Tom, who wasn't here to defend me. I cried for the son I thought I'd raised, who seemed to have disappeared. I cried for myself, for the woman I'd become, invisible and dismissed and easily discarded. But then somewhere around 3 in the morning the tears stopped. And I got angry. The anger started as a small spark in my chest, but it grew and grew until it consumed everything else. How dare they? How dare Derek treat me like I was worthless, like I was nothing more than an inconvenience? How dare Vanessa, this woman who'd known me for less than a year, tell me how to live my life, criticize my worth, covet my home? And then, through the anger came determination. A fierce, burning determination unlike anything I'd felt in years. If Derek wanted me to get a job, I'd get a job. But not just any job. Not some part-time retail position or secretarial work that would let them pat themselves on the back for helping me while still viewing me as beneath them. No, I was going to show him exactly what I was capable of. I was going to prove that I wasn't some washed-up housewife who'd wasted her life. I was going to make him see me again, really see me. And if that meant doing it in a way that made him uncomfortable, well, maybe that was exactly what he needed. The next morning I started researching. Derek worked for a prestigious marketing firm called Meridian Creative Solutions. It was one of the top firms in the city, handling accounts for major corporations and national brands. He was proud of his position there, always talking about the important campaigns he managed, the big clients he handled, the impressive people he worked with. He was especially proud of his relationship with the CEO, Marcus Chan, whom Derek admired almost religiously. I spent days combing through everything I could find about Meridian Creative Solutions. I studied their client list, their company culture, their recent campaigns, their values and mission statement. I looked at their LinkedIn, their website, their social media presence. I read every press release, every article written about them, every review from current and former employees. And that's when I discovered something interesting, something that felt almost like fate handing me an opportunity. They had a small blog that was severely underperforming. The content was sporadic, poorly written, and failed to showcase the company's actual creative capabilities. For a marketing firm that prided itself on innovative communication strategies, their own digital presence was almost embarrassingly weak. I also noticed they had no cohesive visual brand strategy across their digital platforms. Everything looked disconnected, like different departments were operating in silos, each doing their own thing with no unifying vision. I might have left the workforce 28 years ago, but I'd never stopped learning. During Derek's childhood, especially once he started school and I had more free time, I'd taken online courses in digital marketing, graphic design software, content strategy, social media management. It started as a hobby, a way to keep my mind sharp while everyone else around me seemed to be building careers and accomplishments. I taught myself Adobe Creative Suite, learned about SEO and content management systems, studied the psychology of user engagement. I'd even done some freelance work under a pseudonym, just small projects for local businesses and startups, nothing that brought in significant money, but enough to keep me current with industry trends and best practices. I had skills. I had knowledge. I had talent. I just hadn't been using them in any official capacity, hadn't thought they mattered in the grand scheme of my life. But now, looking at Meridian's weak digital presence, I saw an opportunity. So I created a portfolio. I spent 3 weeks doing nothing else, barely sleeping, barely eating, channeling every ounce of frustration and hurt into producing work that was undeniably excellent. I redesigned Meridian's blog concept from the ground up, creating mock-ups that were sleek and professional. I developed a comprehensive visual identity that tied all their platforms together. I wrote sample content pieces that demonstrated their expertise while engaging readers. I created a full digital strategy proposal that addressed their weaknesses and outlined a path to dominance in their market. Every night, I worked until my eyes burned and my fingers ached. And every morning, I woke up feeling more alive than I had in years. Then I did something that, looking back, was either brilliant or completely insane. I created a new professional identity. I couldn't apply as Lorraine Whitmore, Derek's mother. He'd torpedo that immediately, probably wouldn't even read my application before dismissing it. The idea of his mother working at his company would be embarrassing to him, would damage his image as a successful professional who'd made it on his own. So I became Raina Mitchell. Raina was everything Lorraine had stopped being. She was confident, assertive, unapologetic about her talent. She had an impressive portfolio and references from my previous pseudonymous work, which was all legitimate. Raina was who I could have been if I'd never given up my career, or maybe who I was always meant to become. I got a post office box in the next town over for Raina's correspondence. I created professional email accounts and social media profiles, building them carefully with thought-out posts and connections. I even bought a pair of stylish glasses with clear lenses and started wearing my hair differently, straighter and sleeker instead of my usual soft waves. I updated my wardrobe, buying clothes that Lorraine would never wear, power suits in bold colors, designer pieces from consignment shops. I practiced walking differently, standing differently, talking differently. I lowered my voice slightly, changed my speech patterns, adopted different mannerisms. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was psychological. When I looked in the mirror as Raina Mitchell, I saw someone confident, capable, someone who hadn't spent decades being taken for granted. I saw someone who commanded respect, who knew her worth, who wouldn't apologize for taking up space. I saw who I could have been if I'd never given up my career. Or maybe I saw who I was always meant to become. I applied for a contract position at Meridian Creative Solutions as a brand content strategist, submitting my portfolio and a cover letter that highlighted my unique perspective and innovative approach. I didn't expect to hear back quickly. These things usually took weeks. But within 2 days, I got an email from Marcus Chen's executive assistant, asking me to come in for an interview. My hand shook as I read the email. This was real. This was actually happening. Part of me wanted to delete it, to pretend I'd never applied, to go back to being invisible Lorraine who stayed in her lane and didn't cause trouble. But then I thought about Derek's words. It's just a house, Mom. I thought about Vanessa's condescending smile, and her comments about my wasted potential. I thought about 28 years of sacrifices that had been dismissed as worthless. And I clicked accept on the interview invitation. The morning of the interview, I almost backed out a dozen times. What if Derek saw me? What if someone recognized me? What if this whole thing blew up in my face and I ended up looking like a fool, proving Derek right about me being emotional and impractical? But I'd been to Derek's office exactly twice in the 5 years he'd worked there, both times just dropping off forgotten items at reception. He worked on the 3rd floor in the account management department. Most of the executive offices and creative departments were on the 5th and 6th floors. The chances of running into him were slim. If you're liking this story so far, please hit the like button. It really helps me continue sharing these experiences with you. I dressed in a sharp navy suit I'd bought specifically for this, wore my new glasses, and styled my hair in a sleek bun rather than the loose waves I usually favored. I applied makeup differently than usual, contouring my face to subtly change its shape, using a darker lipstick than I'd normally choose. When I looked in the mirror, even I had trouble recognizing myself. I wasn't Lorraine Whitmore, 52-year-old widow and mother. I was Raina Mitchell, creative professional and strategic thinker. Meridian's offices were downtown, in one of those modern glass buildings that look like they belong in a futuristic movie. The lobby was all marble and chrome, impressive and intimidating. I signed in at reception as Raina Mitchell, got my visitor badge, and took the elevator to the 6th floor. My heart pounded the entire way up. With each floor that passed, I questioned what I was doing. This was crazy. This was reckless. The elevator doors opened. Marcus Chen's office was at the end of a long hallway lined with framed awards and campaign posters. The space was impressive without being ostentatious. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, giving a view that probably cost a fortune in rent. The walls were covered with industry awards and successful campaign examples, a visual resume of the company's achievements. Marcus himself was in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to analyze everything. He looked up when his assistant showed me in, and something in his expression made me think he saw more than most people. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, professional, assessing. "Thank you for coming in. Your portfolio was remarkable. Truly exceptional work." "Thank you, Mr. Chan," I replied, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded, how natural it felt to be Reina in this moment. "I was impressed by Meridian's client list and the innovative work you're doing. I saw some areas where I thought I could add value." We sat down and he slid a folder across his desk. "I'll be honest with you. We've been struggling with our digital presence, which is ironic for a marketing firm. But we've been so focused on client work that we've neglected our own brand. When I saw your redesign concepts, I realized you'd identified exactly what we've been missing. You saw problems I didn't even know we had and provided solutions that were creative and practical." For the next hour, we discussed strategy, vision, content calendars, and brand cohesion. I forgot to be nervous. This was what I was good at, what I'd always been good at. Ideas flowed easily, each one building on the last. I could see Marcus becoming more engaged with every suggestion I made, leaning forward, taking notes, asking questions that showed he was really listening. "I have to ask," he said eventually, sitting back in his chair and studying me with those sharp eyes, "why are you interested in contract work rather than a full-time position? Someone with your skills could easily land a senior role at any firm in the city." I'd prepared for this question, had practiced my answer until it sounded natural. "I value flexibility and autonomy," I said smoothly. "I like being able to choose projects that genuinely excite me, rather than being locked into corporate structure. And frankly, I find I do my best work when I'm not bogged down in office politics and bureaucracy. I can focus on what matters, producing excellent results." He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. "I can respect that philosophy. Though I have to warn you, if you do this job as well as I think you will, I'll be trying very hard to convince you to join us permanently." We discussed terms, expectations, deliverables. And then, sitting in that office overlooking the city, Marcus Chan offered me a 3-month contract on the spot, with the possibility of extension based on performance. The pay was generous, far more than I'd expected, enough to prove to Derek and Vanessa and anyone else who doubted me that I was valuable, that I had worth beyond my role as someone's mother or wife. We shook hands, and just like that, I was employed at the same company as my son. But the real test would come on Monday, my first day. I'd be working primarily from the creative department on the 6th floor, but there would be meetings, presentations, times when I'd need to move through the building. I couldn't avoid Derek forever. Eventually, we'd cross paths. I spent the weekend preparing, practicing being Reina, making sure every detail was perfect. I rehearsed responses to potential questions, prepared explanations for my background, created a complete backstory that was true enough to be credible, but vague enough to avoid specific details that might trip me up. I almost ran into him on my second day. I was coming out of the women's restroom when I heard his voice in the hallway, talking loudly on his phone. My heart stopped. I ducked back inside quickly, pressing against the wall, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Through the crack in the door, I watched him walk past, completely oblivious to my presence. He looked stressed, I noticed. There were circles under his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled. His shirt was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Part of me wanted to go to him to ask if he was okay, to smooth his hair and tell him to get more sleep. But then I remembered his words. "You're being emotional and impractical." I remembered how easily he'd dismissed my life, how readily he'd tried to take my home. And the impulse died. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a rhythm. I'd arrive early, usually before 7, when the building was still quiet and Derek rarely came in before 9. I'd often stay late, working until 7 or 8, after Derek had left for the day. When there were all staff meetings that I couldn't avoid, I made sure to sit in the back, kept my head down, took notes on my laptop so I had a reason to not make eye contact with anyone. The few times we were in the same room, he never looked at me twice. To him, I was just another employee, unremarkable and invisible background noise in his professional life. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 28 years being invisible as his mother, and now I was invisible as a colleague. But my work was anything but invisible. The content I created for Meridian's blog started gaining serious traction within the first month. Engagement numbers climbed steadily week after week. The visual rebrand I designed was being implemented across all platforms, and the response from both clients and industry observers was overwhelmingly positive. Marketing publications started featuring Meridian as an example of cohesive brand strategy. Marcus started inviting me to strategy meetings with major clients. I'd sit in conference rooms in my Reina armor, contributing ideas, watching executives twice my supposed age nod and take notes on my suggestions. I was good at this. Better than good. I was exceptional. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I mattered for something beyond my role as someone's wife or mother. I mattered for me, for what I could do, for the value I created. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into my contract, I was in Marcus's office presenting the quarterly content performance report. The numbers were impressive, exceeding every metric we'd set. Marcus was pleased, already talking about extending my contract and increasing my responsibilities. That's when Derek knocked on the open door. "Marcus, sorry to interrupt," he said without looking into the room. "I just need you to sign off on the Henderson proposal before the 3 o'clock deadline." He stopped mid-sentence when he finally noticed me sitting across from Marcus. I held my breath, my entire body tensing. This was it. 6 weeks of careful planning, of staying hidden, of being invisible, and it could all end right now. "Derek, perfect timing," Marcus said, completely unaware of the tension crackling in the air. "I want you to meet Raina Mitchell. She's the genius behind our digital transformation. Raina, this is Derek Whitmore, one of our senior account managers." I stood slowly, keeping my expression pleasantly professional, my body language confident. I extended my hand, making sure my movements were crisp, different from how Lorraine would move. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Whitmore," I said, keeping my voice slightly deeper than my natural tone, adding just a hint of a different inflection, a subtle accent that suggested I might have grown up somewhere else. Derek shook my hand briefly, his eyes skimming over me with polite but complete disinterest. He looked at me the way you'd look at a piece of furniture, noting its presence but assigning it no importance. "Pleasure," he said automatically. "I've heard great things about the rebrand work. Nice job." "Thank you," I said, measuring each word carefully. "It's been a rewarding project to work on." He nodded absently, already turning back to Marcus with his proposal, dismissing me from his attention as quickly as I'd entered it. I sat back down, barely breathing, while they discussed business for the next several minutes. Derek left without giving me another glance, without a second thought. I'd done it. I'd stood 3 feet from my own son, shaken his hand, spoken to him directly, and he hadn't recognized me. The victory felt hollow and triumphant all at once. That evening Derek called me. Not Raina, but me, his mother Lorraine. It was the first time he'd called in almost 2 weeks. "Hey Mom," he said, and I could hear the impatience in his voice already, like talking to me was an obligation he was rushing through. "Just checking in. Have you made any progress on the job search?" I was sitting in my home office, still in my Raina clothes, still wearing the glasses and the sleek hairstyle, looking at the congratulatory email Marcus had sent about the quarterly results. The contrast between my 2 lives had never felt more stark. "I'm working on it," I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral. "It's been 2 months, Mom." He sighed heavily, like I was a disappointing child. "Look, I don't mean to pressure you, but Vanessa and I have been talking seriously about our future. We're thinking about starting a family soon, and we're going to need a bigger place. That house of yours would be perfect for us. Perfect location, perfect size, perfect for raising children." My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. "You want my house? It's not like you need all that space," he said, as if this was obvious, as if my needs were irrelevant. 4 bedrooms for 1 person? It's wasteful, Mom. And you could really use the money from selling it. You could buy a nice little condo somewhere, invest the rest. Be practical for once. How thoughtful of you to plan my future, I said, and I couldn't quite keep the edge out of my voice. Why do you always have to be so difficult about everything? Derek snapped. We're trying to help you plan for your future, to think ahead. Someone has to, since you clearly won't do it yourself. You're being selfish and short-sighted. I closed my eyes, counted to 10, reminded myself that I was playing a long game here. I'll think about it, Derek. That's what you said last time, he said, frustration clear in his voice. At some point, you need to stop thinking and start doing. After he hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, my Reina clothes still on, my professional mask still in place. Then I opened my laptop and got back to work. I had a campaign to plan for one of our biggest clients, and I was going to make sure it was absolutely brilliant. I was going to make sure Derek's mediocrity became impossible to ignore. Do you think I was wrong to hide my identity from my son? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my situation. The months that followed were some of the most intense and fulfilling of my life. I threw myself into my work at Meridian with everything I had. Every ounce of energy and creativity and strategic thinking I possessed. Every campaign I touched seemed to turn to gold. Client satisfaction scores went up across the board. Retention rates improved. The company started winning industry awards for digital innovation, with my strategies specifically cited in the recognition. Marcus became not just my employer but my champion, my advocate, almost a friend. He extended my contract once, then again, each time with increased responsibilities and better compensation. He started introducing me to clients as his secret weapon, the person who could take a good idea and transform it into something extraordinary. He invited me to executive strategy sessions that were usually reserved for senior leadership, asked for my input on company direction, valued my perspective on hiring and organizational decisions. I was becoming integral to Meridian's success, and everyone knew it. Everyone except Derek. And Derek struggled. I didn't have to do anything to sabotage him. I didn't spread rumors or undermine his work or poison anyone against him. I simply excelled at my job, pushed the standards higher, set a new bar for what excellent work looked like at Meridian. And by comparison, Derek's performance looked increasingly mediocre. He was good at what he did, competent enough, but he'd been coasting on charm and confidence for years. He'd been the golden boy of his department, the guy everyone liked, the smooth talker who could schmooze clients over expensive dinners and golf outings. But when Marcus started expecting more than just relationship management, when he started demanding innovative thinking and strategic creativity and quantifiable results, Derek couldn't keep up. I watched it happen from my position in the creative department, observed his slow decline with a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. I heard the whispers in the break room, the concerns shared in hushed tones. Derek Whitmore was losing accounts. Derek Whitmore had botched an important presentation, shown up unprepared to a client meeting. Derek Whitmore was on thin ice with Marcus, and everyone knew it. Part of me felt guilty, wondered if I should somehow help him, protect him the way I'd always protected him. Most of me felt vindicated. Then came the Henderson Corporation pitch and everything accelerated. Henderson was a massive potential client, the kind that could define a company's entire year. They were a national retail chain looking to completely rebrand and relaunch their image. The account was worth millions and half a dozen firms were competing for it. Marcus assembled his absolute best team for the pitch. Himself, Derek, me, and 2 junior associates who were brilliant but inexperienced. He made it clear that winning this account was crucial, that this was the kind of client that could elevate Meridian to the next tier of industry leadership. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. The night before, I barely slept, running through my presentation over and over, refining every word, every slide, every transition. This wasn't just about winning the account anymore. This was about proving something to myself, showing what I was truly capable of when I put everything on the line. Derek, I heard through office gossip, also barely slept, but for different reasons. He was visibly stressed, snapping at colleagues, working late into the night trying to prepare. Vanessa had called the office multiple times, her voice shrill through his speakerphone, demanding to know why he was spending so much time at work, accusing him of having an affair. The pitch meeting was held in Meridian's largest conference room, the one with the impressive view and the expensive furniture that was reserved for only the most important occasions. The Henderson executives arrived promptly at 2, a group of 4 serious-looking people in expensive suits, their expressions neutral but their body language suggesting they'd been through a dozen pitches already and were hard to impress. Our team consisted of Marcus, Derek, myself, and the 2 junior associates. We'd rehearsed our parts, knew the flow, understood the strategy. But Derek was visibly nervous in a way I'd never seen him before. He kept fidgeting with his tie, clearing his throat, shuffling his papers. His hands trembled slightly when he took a sip of water. This was my son, the confident boy who'd always believed he could do anything, and he was falling apart. Marcus opened the presentation smoothly, setting the stage with his characteristic charm and authority. Then he handed it to Derek to walk through the traditional marketing strategy components, the foundation upon which the rest of our pitch would build. Derek stood, and for a moment I saw panic flash across his face. But then his training kicked in, years of practice at being charming and confident, and he launched into his section. He was fine. Adequate. He hit all the expected points, covered the necessary ground, delivered the information professionally. But there was no spark, no innovation, no moment that made the Henderson executives lean forward with interest. He was competent and forgettable, and in a competitive pitch, forgettable means losing. When it was my turn to present the digital and content strategy, the innovative portion that would set us apart from our competitors, I stood and felt that familiar surge of confidence that came with being Reina. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. I walked them through a comprehensive campaign that integrated traditional and digital media in ways they hadn't seen before, leveraging emerging platforms and technologies while staying true to their brand values. I showed them detailed mock-ups that brought the vision to life, data projections based on similar campaigns, engagement strategies that would turn customers into brand advocates. I watched the Henderson executives transform before my eyes. They leaned forward, their neutral expressions shifting to genuine interest. They started taking notes, asking questions, pushing back on certain points to test the strategy. And I handled every objection smoothly, backed everything up with data and case studies and psychological insights into consumer behavior. This was what I'd been training for my entire adult life without even knowing it. All those years of managing a household, organizing complex schedules, planning events, solving problems creatively with limited resources, reading people and understanding what motivated them, negotiating with teachers and coaches and other parents, all of it had prepared me for exactly this moment. I'd spent 28 years developing skills that the world had told me were worthless, and now I was proving they were invaluable. Ms. Mitchell, the Henderson CEO said as my presentation concluded, that was hands down the most innovative and well-thought-out pitch we've heard in months. If you're the kind of talent Meridian employs, I think we'd be foolish to work with anyone else. The other Henderson executives nodded agreement, already pulling out their phones to schedule follow-up meetings. We'd won the account. Right there in the room before we'd even finished the formal pitch. It was worth $3 million over 2 years, with potential for extension. After the Henderson executives left, shaking hands and making plans, Marcus pulled me aside while the others were packing up materials. Reina, he said quietly, his hand on my shoulder. That was extraordinary. I mean it. I've been in this business for 30 years, and that was one of the best pitches I've ever seen. I'm making you lead strategist on this account, full authority over the campaign direction. Thank you, Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. I won't let you down. You never do, he said with a smile. But I was watching Derek over Marcus's shoulder. He stood by the conference room window, staring out at the city below, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The contrast between his posture now and his usual confident bearing was stark. For just a moment, seeing him like that, I felt my heart crack. This was my son after all. The baby I'd carried, the child I'd raised, the boy I'd loved more than life itself. I'd sacrificed everything for him, devoted decades to his well-being and happiness. And now I was watching him fail, and part of it was because of how good I was. But then I remembered standing in my kitchen while he told me to sell my house, while he dismissed my entire life as worthless. I remembered him saying, "It's just a house, Mom," as if 30 years of memories meant nothing. I remembered Vanessa's condescending smile and Derek's embarrassment at having a mother who didn't work, who didn't contribute, who wasn't valuable by their narrow definition. and the sympathy evaporated like morning mist. That evening Derek called me again. Lorraine me, not Raina me. His mother, not his colleague. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he said, and his voice was strained in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager dealing with his first real failure. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, and despite everything, the mother in me immediately went on alert, ready to fix whatever problem he was facing. "I think I might lose my job," he said quietly, vulnerability bleeding through every word. "I'm not performing well enough anymore. Marcus has been pushing me to step up my game, and today I blew a huge pitch. There's this new strategist who's making everyone else look bad. Everything I do seems inadequate compared to her work. She's this woman who came out of nowhere and suddenly she's Marcus's favorite, and I'm becoming irrelevant." I closed my eyes, gripped the phone tighter. "I'm sure you're being too hard on yourself, Derek. You're talented. You've always been talented." "I'm not, Mom. I'm really not. I'm failing, and if I lose this job, Vanessa will." He trailed off, but I could hear everything he wasn't saying. "Vanessa will what?" I pressed. "Nothing. Never mind." He took a shaky breath that sounded like it might turn into tears. "Look, I know I've been pushing you about getting a job and selling the house and everything, but maybe we could work something out. Could you lend me some money? Just until I get back on my feet, figure out my next move." And there it was, the real reason for this call. Now that he needed something, suddenly I was worth calling. Suddenly I was useful. Suddenly my resources, the ones he'd criticized me for living off, were valuable. "Derek, I thought you wanted me to be independent," I said carefully, keeping my voice gentle even as anger simmered beneath. "To build my own financial security. How can I do that if I'm giving away my resources to bail you out?" "This is different, Mom. This is an emergency. This is your son asking for help." "Is it an emergency, though? You have a job, at least for now. Vanessa has a good job. You're both working professionals with income. When I needed understanding and support after your father died, when I needed compassion as I figured out my life, you told me to get a job and sell my house. Now you want me to solve your problems with the money you told me to invest for myself. You don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under," he said, and I could hear him getting angry, defensive. "You've never had to perform in a corporate environment. You've never had real responsibilities or high stakes or people depending on you to deliver results." I had to bite my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Never had real responsibilities. I'd raised him, managed a household, supported his father's career, volunteered in the community, and now I was thriving in the exact corporate environment he claimed I couldn't understand. "I see," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "So will you help me or not?" "I'll think about it," I said, using his own words back at him. "At some point you need to stop thinking and start doing, right?" I ended the call and sat there in my living room, in the house he wanted to take from me, and I made a decision. It was time to stop hiding completely. Not to reveal everything, not yet. But it was time to let Derek really see what I was capable of. It was time to stop being invisible, even as Raina. The next week, there was a company-wide town hall meeting. Marcus had called it to celebrate recent wins, announce organizational changes, and rally the troops for the quarter ahead. Attendance was mandatory for all employees, no exceptions. I knew I couldn't avoid it. Derek would be there. We'd be in the same room for over an hour, and unlike in a client pitch where I could focus on external people, this would be internal, casual, with time for mingling before and after. I dressed carefully that morning, walking a fine line between Raina and Lorraine. I wore my hair in a style that was closer to my natural preference, softer than the severe bun I usually chose. I selected a color, a deep burgundy suit, that I knew Derek had always said looked beautiful on me. That had been Tom's favorite color on me. I was leaving breadcrumbs, subtle hints, testing the boundaries of my disguise. The town hall was held in the building's event space on the first floor, a large room that could accommodate all 200 Meridian employees. Hundreds of people filled the space, chatting and laughing, sipping coffee from the catering setup. I positioned myself in the middle section of the seating, not hiding in the back but not drawing attention up front either. From here I could see Derek in the front section talking with some colleagues, his body language tense. Marcus took the stage at exactly 3 o'clock and began his presentation. He talked about quarterly earnings that had exceeded projections, new clients we'd won, the company's growth trajectory that was putting us among the top firms in the region. Then he got to the part I'd been both dreading and anticipating. "I want to take a moment to recognize exceptional performance," Marcus said, and a slide appeared on the screen behind him with several employee names listed in bold letters. My name, Raina Mitchell, was at the very top. "Raina Mitchell joined us as a contractor just 7 months ago," Marcus continued, "and in that short time, she's completely transformed our digital presence, won us major accounts including the recent Henderson deal, and elevated the standard of work across the entire creative department. Her impact on this company has been nothing short of remarkable." My heart hammered in my chest. "Raina, please stand up so everyone can see who we're talking about." My legs felt like water, but I stood. The room erupted in applause. I could see Derek in the front section, clapping politely, his eyes finally finding me in the crowd. He really looked at me for a full 5 seconds, and then his gaze slid away, still not recognizing me, still seeing Raina the colleague instead of Lorraine the mother. "Effective immediately," Marcus announced. "I'm pleased to tell you that Raina has accepted a permanent position as our Director of Digital Strategy. She'll be joining the senior leadership team and reporting directly to me. Please join me in welcoming her officially to the Meridian family." The applause grew louder, people turning to smile at me, nod their congratulations. I smiled and waved slightly, my professional mask firmly in place, then sat down quickly before my shaking legs gave out. I'd done it. I'd gone from contract worker to director in 7 months. I'd achieved more in half a year than Derek had in 5 years. And he still didn't know it was me. After the town hall ended, there was a reception with coffee and pastries and wine, a chance for people to network and celebrate. I knew I should leave, slip out before things got too casual, but something kept me there. Maybe I wanted to see if Derek would approach me now that I was officially part of leadership. Maybe I wanted to test fate one more time. Maybe I was tired of hiding. I was standing by the refreshment table, sipping wine and chatting with one of the junior designers, when I heard Vanessa's voice cutting through the crowd. I hadn't known she'd be here, but apparently spouses and significant others had been invited to celebrate the company's success. "Derek, you absolutely need to introduce yourself to that woman," Vanessa was saying loudly, her voice carrying over the ambient noise. "The new director everyone's talking about. You need to network, build alliances. Maybe she could mentor you or something, help you figure out what you're doing wrong." I turned slightly and saw them approaching my position, Vanessa pulling a reluctant Derek by the arm. It was too late to escape. "Ms. Mitchell," Derek said, extending his hand for the 3rd time since I'd started working here, still with that same polite, distant smile that cut deeper each time I saw it. "Congratulations on the promotion. It's very well deserved from everything I've heard." "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore," I said, shaking his hand, my son's hand, feeling the familiar grip that I'd held when he was learning to cross streets. Vanessa inserted herself immediately, her smile sharp and calculating. "I'm Vanessa Whitmore, Derek's wife. I have to say, it's so inspiring to see a woman in leadership, especially someone who must have worked incredibly hard to get here despite starting later in life." The casual ageism in her tone was infuriating, the implication that I'd had to overcome the handicap of my age to achieve anything worthwhile. But I kept my smile pleasant, professional. We all have different paths in life. Some of us take time to raise families before pursuing career advancement. Those years teach skills that are invaluable in business: patience, strategic thinking, the ability to motivate and nurture talent. "Oh, do you have children?" Vanessa asked, her tone suggesting polite interest but her eyes calculating, trying to place me in some category she could understand. I looked directly at Derek, held his gaze. "One son. He's very successful in marketing as well, though recently he's been struggling with work-life balance and professional challenges." Derek wasn't really listening, already distracted by someone else across the room, his attention span as short as ever. But something in my tone must have snagged Vanessa's attention because she looked at me more closely, her eyes narrowing. "You know, you seem strangely familiar," she said slowly, her head tilting as she studied my face. "Have we met somewhere before? Do you live in the Riverside area?" That was my neighborhood. My pulse quickened. "I don't believe we've met," I said smoothly, keeping my expression neutral. "I'm relatively new to the city, actually. Just moved here when I took the position at Meridian." A lie, but a necessary one. Vanessa's eyes continued to scan my face, and I knew I needed to extract myself before she looked too hard, before whatever instinct had made her suspicious dug deeper. If you'll excuse me, I said graciously, I need to catch Marcus before he leaves. There are some details about the Henderson account we need to discuss. It was lovely to meet you both officially. I walked away feeling Vanessa's gaze burning into my back, her suspicion hanging in the air like smoke. That night, I got a text from Derek at 11:45. I was already in bed, reading, trying to decompress from the intensity of the day. Mom, I need to ask you something kind of random. Did you ever work in marketing or advertising? My blood ran cold. I stared at the message for a long time, my mind racing through possible responses, trying to figure out what had triggered this question. Finally, I typed back, "Why do you ask?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Just curious. You mentioned taking some courses once years ago. What kind of courses were they? Graphic design, some digital marketing basics. Why, sweetheart? Another long pause. Vanessa thought someone at my office reminded her of you, but I told her that's impossible. You and this woman are nothing alike. The words stung more than they should have. Why impossible? I typed, unable to help myself. Because you don't look like that anymore, Mom. You've kind of let yourself go. And this woman is sharp, put together, successful. Different league. I deleted my first response, and my second, and my third. Finally, I settled on, "Thanks, Derek. That's very kind of you to say to your mother." He didn't respond. He never did when confronted with his own cruelty. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling for hours, Derek's words echoing in my mind. You've kind of let yourself go. Different league. His own mother, and he couldn't imagine her being successful, being sharp, being valuable. The next few weeks were tense in a way that made my skin crawl. Vanessa started coming to the office more frequently, bringing Derek lunch, attending company happy hours and events she'd never bothered with before. And every time she was there, she'd watch me from across rooms, her eyes calculating, her expression thoughtful. She never approached me directly again, but I could feel her suspicion growing like a living thing. Meanwhile, Derek's performance continued to slide. Marcus called him in for a formal performance review, and though I wasn't supposed to know about it, word travels in offices, especially when someone is struggling. Derek was being put on a performance improvement plan, the corporate kiss of death. He had 90 days to meet specific metrics or face termination. I told myself it wasn't my fault, that Derek's struggles were his own doing, that I was just doing my job to the best of my ability. But late at night, lying in the bed I'd shared with Tom, I'd wonder if I'd gone too far. Was I punishing my son for being selfish and cruel? Or was I simply showing him what I was capable of, something he'd refused to see? Was there even a difference? The breaking point came during a client dinner for the Henderson account, a celebration of a successful campaign launch that had exceeded every metric we'd set. It was a Friday evening in early December. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place with cloth napkins and wine lists, as thick as novels, and servers who described each dish like it was a work of art. The Henderson executives had insisted on celebrating with the full team, and Marcus had insisted that everyone involved in the campaign attend, which meant both Derek and I would be there for hours at the same table. I sat between Marcus and one of the Henderson executives, directly across from Derek and Vanessa. The seating arrangement felt like fate or punishment, I wasn't sure which. The dinner started pleasantly enough. Wine flowed freely, conversation bubbled and sparked. People were relaxed and happy. The Henderson executives were thrilled with the campaign results. Revenue was up 43% compared to the previous quarter. Social media engagement had tripled. Brand sentiment scores were at an all-time high. This is all thanks to Raina's brilliant strategy, Marcus said, raising his wine glass in a toast. To Raina Mitchell, the best investment Meridian has ever made, and the woman who proved that talent can come from anywhere, at any stage of life. Everyone drank to the toast, glasses clinking. I smiled graciously, but I could see Derek's jaw tightening, his fingers gripping his wine stem so hard I thought it might break. Tell me, Raina, the Henderson CEO said, leaning forward with genuine interest, I'm curious about your background. How did you get into this field? What's your story? This was the question I'd been dreading all night, the one that could unravel everything. I actually started in graphic design many years ago, I said carefully, choosing each word like I was walking through a minefield. But I took a significant amount of time off to raise my family, to be present for my child during his formative years. I got back into the field through freelance work several years ago and built from there. How long were you out of the workforce? Vanessa asked, her tone deceptively sweet, her eyes locked on mine like a predator that had spotted movement. About 28 years, I said honestly, because the truth was on all my employment documents in my official records. Derek's head snapped up from his plate. I watched his eyes, saw them really look at me for the first time in months, saw the wheels beginning to turn behind them. 28 years, he repeated slowly, his voice strange. And you said you have one child? My heart hammered against my ribs. Yes. One son. What does your son do? Vanessa pressed, leaning forward now, her instincts clearly screaming that something was off. The table had gone quiet, everyone watching this exchange, sensing the tension without understanding its source. He works in marketing as well, I said, maintaining eye contact with Derek, willing him to see me, really see me. He's talented but still finding his way, learning that charm and confidence aren't substitutes for genuine skill and hard work. Derek stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me, I need some air. He walked toward the restaurant exit, his movements stiff, robotic. After a moment's hesitation, I followed him, my heart pounding, knowing this was it, knowing everything was about to change. I found him standing on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, his hands shaking as he tried to light a cigarette with a lighter he kept clicking futilely. You don't smoke, I said quietly, stepping out into the cool December air. He turned, and in the streetlight, I could see his face clearly. The recognition was written there now, impossible to miss, mixed with disbelief and horror, and something that might have been betrayal. Mom, he whispered, the word barely audible. I reached up slowly and took off my glasses, the ones that had helped hide me for 7 months. I pulled the pins from my hair and let it fall loose around my shoulders, shook it out into the waves he'd know. Hello, Derek, I said softly. His face went through a series of emotions so quickly I could barely track them all. Shock, confusion, anger, hurt, shame, more anger. What the hell are you doing? His voice rose, loud enough that a couple walking past turned to stare. You've been working at my company this whole time? You've been lying to everyone? To me? To Marcus? I haven't lied about anything, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. I never claimed to be anyone other than who I am. I just became the version of myself you never bothered to see. This is insane. You've sabotaged my career. You did this deliberately to make me look bad. I've done absolutely nothing to you, Derek. I've simply done my job, done it well, done it to the best of my ability. Is it my fault that my best turned out to be better than anyone expected? Is it my fault that when the bar was raised, you couldn't meet it? You did this to spite me, to punish me for telling you to get a job. This is revenge. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed everything for, and I felt a strange calm settle over me, a clarity I hadn't felt in years. You told me I was a burden, I said quietly, but each word landed with weight. You told me I'd wasted my life, that I had no purpose, no value, nothing meaningful to contribute. You told me to get a job, to do something worthwhile with myself. So I did exactly what you asked. Is it my fault that I turned out to be exceptional at it? You made me look incompetent in front of everyone. No, sweetheart. You did that yourself. I just showed everyone what excellence looks like, and by comparison your mediocrity became visible. That's not my fault. That's yours. You've been coasting on charm and connections for years, doing the minimum, assuming it was enough. When someone raised the standard, you couldn't keep up. That's not my responsibility to fix. He stared at me like I was a stranger, like I was someone he'd never met before. Maybe I was. Maybe I'd always been a stranger, and he'd been too busy seeing me as a supporting character in his life to notice I was a person with my own story. Marcus will fire you when he finds out, Derek said desperately, grasping for some weapon he could use. This is fraud. You used a fake name. You lied on your application. Raina Mitchell is my professional name, and it's perfectly legal to use one, I said calmly. And I've signed all my contracts, all my tax forms, all my official documents as Lorraine R. Mitchell Whitmore. My full legal name. The HR department knows exactly who I am. Marcus knows my complete legal name because it's on every piece of paperwork. I've been completely transparent with everyone who needed to know. I just didn't advertise my personal relationships because they weren't relevant to my job performance. I watched the realization hit him that I'd been smarter than he'd given me credit for, that I protected myself legally while building my new professional identity. Why? He asked finally, and for the first time, I heard genuine hurt in his voice instead of anger. Why would you do this to me? I'm your son. I didn't do this to you, Derek, I said, and I felt tears burning behind my eyes but refused to let them fall. I did this for me. You're just collateral damage. And maybe, just maybe, that's the lesson you needed to learn. That the world doesn't revolve around you. That your mother is a person with value and talent and worth beyond how she serves your needs or fits into your life. I'm going to lose my job, he said, and now there were tears on his face running down his cheeks unchecked. Probably, I agreed, because there was no point in lying. Not because of me, but because you haven't been performing well enough. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to find something you're actually passionate about instead of just coasting on a title that looks good. Vanessa will leave me. She's already threatening to. She said she didn't marry me to be a failure. And there it was, the real fear underneath everything else. Not losing his job, not losing his identity, but losing his status, his image, his trophy wife who'd never loved him for who he was but for what he represented. Then she was never worth having, I said gently, reaching out to touch his arm but then pulling back, unsure if the gesture would be welcome. Derek, you need to grow up. You need to figure out who you are beyond what you own, who you've impressed, what you've achieved on paper. You need to learn empathy and gratitude and humility. You need to understand that people aren't just supporting characters in your story. And you're going to teach me that by humiliating me in front of my entire company? I'm not trying to humiliate you. I'm trying to live my own life. You force me to choose between being visible as your disappointing mother or invisible as my capable self. I chose myself. I'm sorry if that hurts you, but I'm not sorry for the choice I made. The restaurant door opened and Marcus stepped out, his expression unreadable as he looked between Derek and me. Everything all right out here? He asked carefully. Derek looked at me, a question in his eyes, a silent plea. I could expose everything right now, or I could let him make this choice, decide for himself what kind of man he wanted to be. Marcus, I said before Derek could speak, before I could change my mind. There's something you should know, something I should have disclosed earlier. Derek and I know each other outside of work. His father, Tom Whitmore, was my husband. Derek is my son. Marcus's eyebrows rose sharply. Your son. I should have disclosed the relationship when I was hired, I continued. I apologize for that omission, but I want to be absolutely clear that it hasn't affected my work or my professional judgment. Derek and I have had minimal interaction at the office, and I've never let our family relationship influence my business decisions. Marcus looked at Derek with something that might have been disappointment. Did you know Raina was your mother? No, Derek admitted, his voice small. I just figured it out tonight. I didn't recognize her before now. You didn't recognize your own mother? Marcus sounded incredulous, and I could see him reassessing Derek in real time. How is that even possible? Derek had no answer for that. Just stood there looking defeated and young and lost. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this information, calculating what it meant for the company and for team dynamics. Then he said, Raina, Lorraine, whatever name you prefer to use, your work speaks for itself. You're one of the most talented strategists I've ever had the privilege of working with. This family relationship doesn't change your value to this company, or my respect for your abilities. He turned to Derek and his expression hardened. But we need to have a very serious conversation on Monday morning. If you couldn't even recognize your own mother, maybe you're not as observant or detail-oriented as this position requires. That level of not paying attention to what's right in front of you is troubling in someone who's supposed to be managing client relationships. Marcus went back inside, leaving Derek and me alone in the cold December air, the gap between us wider and more visible than it had ever been. I can't believe you actually did this, Derek said again, but this time there was less anger and more wonder in his voice. I can't believe you never saw me, I replied. We stood there for a long moment, mother and son, strangers who shared blood and history but little understanding. Finally, Derek said, "What happens now?" "Now," I said, pulling my coat tighter against the cold, "you decide what kind of man you want to be. You decide if you want to keep blaming other people for your problems, or if you want to take responsibility for your own growth. And I continue being the woman I've discovered I can be. Will you tell Vanessa about all of this?" I thought about his wife, with her designer clothes and her subtle cruelty and her transactional view of relationships. That's your choice to make, not mine, Derek. But I'll tell you this. If you're building your entire life on lies and appearances and what other people think, it's going to crumble eventually anyway. The only question is whether you'll learn something from the collapse, or just look for someone else to blame. I left him there on that sidewalk and went back inside to the dinner I'd earned, to the colleagues who respected me, to the life I'd built for myself from the ashes of the one I'd been told to abandon. The meal continued, but I barely tasted the food. My mind was reeling with everything that had just happened, with the weight of the secret I'd been carrying finally lifted, with the uncertainty of what came next. Derek didn't come back to the dinner. Through the window, I saw him get into an Uber and disappear into the city lights. On Monday, Derek didn't come to work. Or Tuesday. On Wednesday, I got an email from HR informing me that Derek Whitmore had resigned from Meridian Creative Solutions, effective immediately. I sat staring at that email for a long time, feelings I couldn't name swirling through my chest. I won, I supposed. I'd proven my point, demonstrated my value, shown Derek and Vanessa and anyone else who dismissed me that I was capable of extraordinary things. But victory felt complicated, bittersweet, heavy in ways I hadn't anticipated. That evening, as I was making dinner in the kitchen where this whole journey had started, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Derek standing there, his eyes red and swollen, his posture defeated in a way I'd never seen. He looked young suddenly, like the boy he'd been before the world taught him to be hard. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I stepped aside. We sat in the living room where he'd grown up, where Tom and I had raised him, where so many memories lived in the photographs on the walls and the worn spots on the furniture. "Vanessa left me," he said without preamble, his voice flat and empty. "When I told her I'd quit my job, she said she didn't sign up to be married to a failure. She's already filed for divorce." I wanted to say I was sorry, but I wasn't entirely sure I was. Vanessa had never been good for him, had never seen the parts of him worth nurturing. "I've been thinking a lot over the past few days," Derek continued, staring at his hands, "about what you said, about who I've become, about how I've treated you, treated other people, treated myself." He looked up at me, and I saw my little boy in his face again, the child who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers, who used to tell me I was the prettiest mom at school pickup. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered, and then the tears came deep and wrenching. "I'm so sorry for everything. You were right about all of it. I've been selfish and cruel and blind to everything but my own wants. You gave me everything, your whole life, and I threw it back in your face the moment I thought I didn't need you anymore." I moved to sit beside him, took his hand like I used to when he was small and scared. "I don't know how to fix this," he said through tears. "I don't know how to make any of this right." "You start by being honest," I said softly. "With yourself, with me, with everyone in your life. You start by doing the hard work of becoming the person you want to be instead of performing the person you think you should be. And you accept that it's going to take time, that there's no quick fix, that some damage takes years to repair. Can you ever forgive me?" I thought about that question carefully, didn't want to answer too quickly with a meaningless platitude. "Eventually, yes," I said. "But Derek, you need to understand something clearly. I'm not going back to being invisible or small or apologetic about taking up space. I'm not giving up my career or my house or my new identity. I've found myself after spending decades lost, and I'm not giving that up for anyone, not even you. I wouldn't want you to," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Mom, watching you work, really watching you once I knew it was you, seeing what you're capable of, I was amazed. Genuinely amazed. I never knew you had all that inside you. You never asked," I said simply. "You never looked. I know. And that's entirely on me. I took you for granted my whole life. Assumed you existed just to support me and Dad. Never thought about what you might want or need or dream about. We talked for hours that night, really talked, maybe for the first time in his adult life. Derek told me about the pressure he'd always felt to be successful, to impress Tom, to prove himself worthy of our sacrifices. I told him about the loneliness of the past few years, the feeling of being forgotten and erased, the pain of his dismissal when I'd needed compassion. It wasn't a fix. One conversation, even a long and honest one, couldn't undo years of damage and neglect and taking each other for granted. But it was a beginning, fragile and tentative but real. Over the next few months, Derek moved back home temporarily, into his old childhood bedroom. Not because I was supporting him financially. He got a job at a smaller boutique marketing firm within 3 weeks, but because he needed time to rebuild himself, figure out who he was without Vanessa's expectations or corporate prestige or the armor he'd been wearing for years. He started seeing a therapist twice a week, working through issues that went deeper than I'd realized. And slowly, painfully, we started to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty instead of obligation. It was different now, fundamentally different. I wasn't just his mother anymore, wasn't just the woman who'd raised him. I was also a person he respected, someone he saw as an equal, someone whose opinion and insights he valued. As for me, I thrived at Meridian in ways I'd never imagined possible. Marcus promoted me again within a year to Vice President of Strategy and Innovation. I became one of the company's key leaders, helping to shape its direction and culture, mentoring younger employees, speaking at industry conferences. I bought new clothes that made me feel powerful and beautiful. I traveled for work to cities I'd only dreamed of seeing. I dated occasionally, though nothing serious developed. I was too busy discovering who I was to add someone else's expectations to the mix. I was becoming myself, finally, after 52 years of being defined by my relationships to other people. One evening, about a year and a half after everything had come to light, Derek and I were having dinner at the house, just the two of us. He'd been doing well at his new job, seemed more grounded and genuine, less concerned with performing success and more focused on actually being good at what he did. "Mom," he said over dessert, "I need to tell you something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "I'm grateful," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for what you did, for how it all happened. I was turning into someone I would have hated if I'd ever stopped long enough to look in a mirror. You saved me from that version of myself, even though it meant risking our relationship." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You saved yourself, Derek." I just held up a mirror and refused to look away when the reflection was ugly. "Can I ask you something I've been wondering about?" "Of course." "When you were standing in that kitchen, when I told you to get a job and made you feel worthless, did you plan all of this? Was it revenge from the start?" I thought about that question carefully, wanted to give him an honest answer. "At first," I said slowly, "I just wanted to prove I wasn't useless or wasted. I wanted to show you and Vanessa that I had value, that dismissing me was wrong. But as time went on, as I became Reina and discovered what I was actually capable of when I believed in myself, it stopped being about you at all. It became about me, about reclaiming my identity and my power and my right to matter in this world." "I understand that now," he said. "And I'm proud of you, Mom. I should have said that years ago, should have been proud of you all along for everything you sacrificed and accomplished. But I'm saying it now and I mean it. I'm proud of who you are." 2 years after that initial confrontation in my kitchen, I stood in that same room, but now it was filled with people and laughter and warmth. Derek was there with Sophie, his new girlfriend, a kind veterinarian who treated me with genuine warmth and asked thoughtful questions about my life. Marcus was there with his husband, having become not just my boss but one of my closest friends. Several colleagues from Meridian, people I'd mentored who'd become like family. We were celebrating 2 things: my promotion to Chief Strategy Officer and the publication of my first book, Never Too Late, Finding Success After 50, which had just hit the bestseller lists. Derek raised his glass for a toast, his eyes clear and sincere in a way they hadn't been in years. "To my mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion but steady with conviction. "The strongest, most talented, most resilient woman I know. Thank you for never giving up on yourself even when I gave up on you. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to change, to grow, to become better than you were. Thank you for loving me enough to let me fail, so I could learn to succeed on my own terms." Everyone drank and I felt tears prick my eyes, but these were good tears, healing tears, tears that watered growth instead of drowning in grief. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, I sat in my backyard, Tom's backyard, the backyard where I'd once felt like my life had ended. But now it felt like a beginning, like a garden in early spring with everything just starting to bloom. I thought about the journey that had led me here, the pain and anger and fear that had catalyzed everything. The moment I decided to stop being invisible, to stop making myself small, to stop apologizing for existing. I thought about Derek and how close we'd both come to losing each other forever. How our broken relationship had forced both of us to grow in ways that would never have happened if things had stayed comfortable and familiar. And I thought about all the women out there my age or older or younger, who feel invisible, who've been told they're past their prime, who've sacrificed so much of themselves that they've forgotten who they are underneath all the roles they play. This story is for you, I thought. This journey is for you. It's never too late to find yourself, to prove yourself, to become yourself. You are not just someone's mother or someone's wife or someone's support system. You are a person with value and talent and purpose that exists independent of how you serve others. And if the people in your life can't see that, if they've taken you for granted or dismissed your worth or made you feel invisible, maybe it's time to show them who you really are. Not for revenge, though if that comes as a side effect, so be it. Not for validation, though that's nice when it arrives. But for yourself, for the woman you've always been underneath all the expectations and limitations others placed on you. Did I handle everything perfectly? No. There are things I might have done differently, moments where I could have been kinder or more direct or less caught up in the satisfaction of proving people wrong. But I don't regret the core of what I did. I don't regret refusing to stay small. I don't regret claiming my place in the world. I don't regret becoming visible, valuable, undeniable. My son told me to get a job, so I became his boss's favorite. But more importantly, more meaningfully, I became my own favorite. I became someone I was proud to be, someone I respected, someone who took up space unapologetically and created value undeniably. And that, more than any promotion or success or moment of vindication, is what matters most. So I'm asking you now, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have revealed yourself earlier, been more direct, handled the whole thing differently? Or do you understand why I did it the way I did? Why sometimes we need to become someone new to remember who we've always been? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know how this story lands for you, what resonates and what challenges you. And if you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been dismissed or taken for granted or made to feel like your best years are behind you, know this with absolute certainty. It is never too late to step into the light. It is never too late to show the world, and more importantly, to show yourself, what you're truly capable of when you stop apologizing for existing and start celebrating who you are. You have value. You have worth. You have talents and insights and experiences that matter. Don't let anyone, not even people you love, convince you otherwise. Thank you for listening to my story, for staying with me through this entire journey. If you enjoyed it, if it moved you or inspired you or made you think differently about your own life, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories of transformation and empowerment. With love and respect, Auntie Helen Stories.